Drzewo demoniczne I magiczne.
A demonic and magical tree, infamous for the poisonous alkaloid it contains. Protected today, but used for centuries. The yew, as it is referred to here, is a tree species that is closely linked to the history of the Polish state. Over the centuries, it has been used as a poison, medicine, material for weapons and furniture. Valued on the one hand, it is legendary and feared on the other. The history of the yew as a species is both dark and intriguing. The yew, history written in a tree. The yew as a tree is not majestic, but it has its own character. It is somewhat stocky, with brown bark and a vivid green crown. In autumn, the branches are trimmed with picturesque fruit of a distinctive red color called aril, which envelops the seed. In recent years, thanks to the efforts of foresters, yew is no longer a rare species in the forests. It has a particular waviness, marked in the annual rings by dark zones of latewood. The wood of the yew is a natural raw material with a beautiful grain, orange-yellow in color with brown-red veining of various shades. It is characterized by very narrow growths. Yew wood is ductile and flexible. It has no specific odor or resin. It is very durable, resistant to weather conditions and to decay by fungi. It is also not attacked by insects. It is characterized by its high mechanical strength. These properties of yew timber have allowed for versatile use over the centuries. The common yew is a very interesting species from many perspectives. Its history is very much linked to man. Man has used yew since the dawn of time. The purpose of the yew has been very different. We are well aware that the best bows were made precisely from yew wood. You could say that yew was a strategic material because the weapons were best just made of yew wood. It also caused its price to be very high. So this human pressure on the yew forests, on the yew wood, was very high. This is also why it was the first tree species to be protected in Poland. In 1410, in the Warecki Statute, yew was mentioned as a special species. There were very severe penalties for cutting down yew trees.
Widzimy tu przekrój pnia, cisa.
Seen here is a cross-section of the trunk of a European yew. Two colorings of the wood can be seen here. Just beneath the bark we have sapwood of this creamy, almost white color, and heartwood, which is orange. It appears, depending on the conditions, in shades such as more brown, reddish, and red. If we were to produce a bow like the ones that stand here, we would try to make them in such a way that the layer that stretches when the bow is bent is made precisely from the sapwood of the yew. This is the sub-bark layer of the tree, so it will be easiest to remove the bark, and we already have the first layer of the bow intact. Not a single growth ring or fiber of the wood has been broken, so it will be very resistant to stretching. And we also have a layer of hardwood, which in turn does not have such good tensile properties as sapwood, but is outstanding when it comes to compression. Actually, as far as yew is concerned, this is its key feature. Because the wood is very resistant to compression, it produces no wrinkles, no cracks, no signs of crushing of the durable material, which later affects the speed at which the bow throws the arrow. Yew is generally a soft species when it comes to the actual wood itself. Because of the properties I mentioned, it is just very flexible. When firearms were invented, yews lost their strategic importance. They were still very valuable because the wood was used to make all sorts of furniture, marquetry, which of course meant that this yew was still very valuable. The yew, in its needles and seeds, has a chemical compound called taxin, which, when ingested, enters the bloodstream, causing severe poisoning. Until about 200 years ago, it was believed that the shade of yew trees could be toxic, and children were warned against being near them. According to legends and lore, resting in the shade of a yew tree could cause a person to turn into a deer, which is resistant to taxin, as described by Father Krzysztof Kluk, among others. According to literature and verbal accounts, horses and sheep were the most vulnerable to yew poison. A dose of around 20 decagrams of yew needles could be lethal for them. Only goats and forest animals were immune to its effects. This brought the species into disrepute, and yew began to disappear from farmsteads. Despite its general charm, the poisonous substance in its tissues often eliminated it as an ornamental species. However, as is often the case in the natural world, substances of plant origin can be both poison and medicine. This is also the case with taxin, where agents derived from this substance are used in folk and conventional medicine. The biology of the yew is very interesting. It is a dioecious species, which means that it is a separate sex species. In this case, there is a female specimen, which produces only seeds with an aril. In contrast, there are also, of course, male individuals. The sexual structure of such a population is usually about half and half. It is also a poisonous species. It is important to remember that 50 grams is more or less a lethal dose for humans. Any consumption of any part of the yew tree should be avoided. Apart from the fleshy aril, the red aril, which is edible and sweet, it is also readily eaten by all sorts of animals, such as birds, which simply by eating it spread the yew over very long distances. The yew is now a very rare species. It is protected in reserves. In addition, we are seeing a problem with the lack of young generation. There are no small trees to replace the old ones, which are slowly dying off somewhere. One of the rarest Polish tree species is the common yew. Although this species is widespread in Poland, as it can be found in at least 40 nature reserves, it is relatively rare in our commercial stands. The state forests have been implementing a program for the protection and restoration of the common yew in Poland for 20 years. And in places such as the Arboretum in Sitzhof, seedlings are produced to introduce this species into commercial stands. We have produced nearly 200,000 yew seedlings over the last 20 years. In Poland, the yew is partially protected. In nature reserves, mainly with passive protection. Here, the area with growing yew trees is left and natural processes are observed. In several nature reserves, yew tree crown release treatments have been carried out in agreement with the state forests. The treatments were directed at removing trees that interfere with yew growth and fruiting. These tasks have had a measurable effect on the growth and condition of the yew. In commercial forests, ex situ active protection is favored, involving the establishment of commercial crops from material collected mainly in nature reserves, as well as in seed plantations that are beginning to bear fruit. Active protection measures will lead to a more efficient gene flow in the population and can thus partly neutralize the negative effects of previous human activities. This statement applies to all woody species that have been given reserve protection. It can be said that yew tends to vegetate in the shade. Natural regeneration in more than half of the reserves is unsuccessful. Hence, the yew populations are declining and may die out. The cultural term for species that grow in shade is shade-bearing. Shade-bearing species can function in shade or semi-shade, but need light to grow properly. One reserve where active protection measures have been carried out in addition to passive protection is the Leon Wyczółkowski Old Polish Yew Reserve. Here we can admire some of the oldest yew trees in Poland. We are in such a place where, as part of the protection program for the restoration of the common yew, we have created a kind of copy of the Old Polish Yew Reserve in Wierzchlas. We hope that this area will one day take over the function of the oldest reserve in Poland. We do not know how the extinction of yew trees in the reserve itself will end, so let this area be such a reservoir of common yew trees in this locality. Let it be a safeguard for the future, and we hope that tall yew trees will also grow here for decades, for hundreds of years to come. Wood is a natural, ecological and renewable raw material. Everyone has wood in their home in various forms, and it is essential to everyone in everyday life, regardless of their views and social status. The decline in the yew population was caused by the versatile use of its wood in the past. Thus, the current expansion of yew resources, especially in economic crops, should yield such good results that future generations will be able to enjoy this species in forests, but also its wood used in various spheres of life. Restoration activities do not only mean introducing yew into the forest in the form of economic crops, but also selecting the future seed base so that seedlings with the greatest possible genetic diversity and resistance are introduced into the environment. Then the crop will be sustainable and stable. Yew restoration activities in Poland were preceded by an inventory of the species' presence in the country, carried out by the Forest Gene Bank Kostrzyca. The aim was to get to know the yew seed base. The selection of populations to be restituted was followed by seed collection. Then, the production of planting material began. Yew is a species with a rather complex biology and quite specific requirements. Its seeds require stratification, that is, preparation for sowing. It is quite a time-consuming and complicated process, as you have to change the temperature of the seeds, which are deposited in cold storage before sowing, every day for more than 30 weeks. Then the species is sown. Under conditions such as here, under the tree canopy, it grows for about 2 years. After that, it is nursed into containers, and only after 7 years or so, it is suitable to be brought out into the environment and planted in its final location. It is a protected species, so all these tasks require a permit from the Nature Conservation Service for the collection of the seeds, the production of the seedlings, and their introduction into the environment. This is what we do here at the nursery, among other things. In the state forests, ex situ conservation is mainly carried out, protecting the yew gene pool outside the site. We are located in the area of the common yew seed plantation. This is one of the few plantations of this type in Poland. Here, on an area of approximately half a hectare, we have preserved the gene pool of the entire Sudeten yew population from the Bardo forest district. These trees for the plantation have such a low, shrubby habit, as they are propagated vegetatively. These are the clones of the mother trees that grow in the Cisowa Góra reserve. And on this plantation we have placed around 500 specimens of this yew. As a result, we are already independent when it comes to the seeds of this species. We can collect these seeds, produce seedlings, and introduce them into the environment. This plantation bore fruit for the first time since its establishment last year. We managed to harvest about 5 kilograms of seeds, practically as much as in the entire Cisowa Góra reserve. In 2011, a study entitled Selection of Genotypes and Populations of the Common Yew, Taxus baccata L, to protect genetic variability was commissioned by the General Directorate of State Forests and prepared under the direction of Professor Andrzej Lewandowski. They support the Common Yew Restoration Program in Poland. In 2006, when the program for the protection and restoration of yew trees in Poland was established, we had no information on the level of genetic variability and diversity among yew tree populations in Poland. The General Directorate of State Forests commissioned us a study to fill this gap. We studied a total of 31 populations and found that yews in Poland still retain a high level of genetic variability and relatively low genetic differentiation. We also identified 3 regions within which this restoration program would be implemented. These regions were northeastern Poland, whereas southern Poland was divided into 2 regions, the Sudety and Carpathian regions, and this restoration program was to be implemented within these 3 regions. On the other hand, in places where yew trees do not occur naturally today, that is, in central Poland, in places where they could be planted, we would like to mix as much as possible material which comes from different populations in different regions, so that the artificial populations created in this way have a relatively high level of genetic variability, which may result in them being more resistant and malleable and better adapted to the changes we expect. In 2 years' time, it will be 20 years since the yew restoration program was implemented. And it has to be said here that foresters have achieved fantastic results in this field because thanks to their work, hundreds of thousands of yew trees have been restored to the forests over tens of hectares. Also thanks to their work, the yew is no longer an endangered species in Poland. After examining yew populations, sites are selected from which seeds can be collected for the program, characterized by a high level of genetic variability, low inbreeding and high effective population size. Twenty of the examined populations are characterized by good parameters for seed dispersal. Populations with slightly lower than average parameters should not be used as a seed base in the first instance, but only to a limited extent. By running a yew restoration program, the state forests have ensured that the species is not threatened with extinction. As part of the program, around 350 hectares have been established and more than 700,000 seedlings have been introduced into the wild. The yew tree was moved from strict protection to partial protection, although as of today, it is no longer a species that is in danger of extinction. The yew tree is mainly associated with the medieval period and the rule of the Piast and Jagiellonian dynasties. The increased exploitation of yew wood occurred in the 13th and 14th centuries. Because of its suppleness, resilience and durability, yew wood was used to make militaria such as crossbows and bows, both for fighting and hunting purposes. In people's minds, it also functions as a word from which towns were named and placed as part of the coats of arms of ancient families. Here is a replica of a medieval bow, a war bow, made from yew of first-class quality. This piece of wood is so compact that it takes practically no thickness to wring a very high pulling force out of it. This bow has around 70 kilograms of tension at full arrow length. This is the pull force used in the Middle Ages for war bows. The grain is so dense that we can barely count or even notice it. Bows of this type threw very heavy war arrows, with very heavy arrowheads adapted to penetrate the armor of knights. Of course, as far as armor was concerned, they were shaped accordingly. They were not flat pieces of sheet metal. However, with the right angle of impact, armor also succumbed to such bows. The advantage of firearms over the bow was the simplicity of their use. However, when it came to the longbow, in order to use it, one had to practice practically all one's life from the age of about 10, or even less, and gradually get the body used to it. It was not only about developing the muscles, but also the bones, tendons, and ligaments of the body. As a species with a rich and long history, yew has been heavily exploited over the centuries. Mainly due to the unique properties of its wood, this almost led to its total extinction. In an effort to preserve this valuable species, the state forests introduced a nationwide yew restoration program, which has played a key role in its conservation. Thanks to the measures taken, the yew went from total protection to partial protection, and today it is gradually regaining its place in Polish forests.